Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into some fascinating Islamic thought, specifically the Book of Intelligence and Ignorance from Al-Kafi. And just a quick reminder, Al-Kafi is a collection of hadith, so we're essentially getting wisdom straight from the Prophet Muhammad and the Imams. It's like having a direct conversation with these incredible figures from history, and for this deep dive, we're focusing on pages 95 to 127. We'll be exploring their insights on, well, you guessed it, intelligence and ignorance. To help us unpack all this wisdom, we have a true expert in Islamic traditions joining us today.
I'm so glad to be here. It's always an honor to delve into these profound teachings.
Right. Right off the bat, I was struck by this story of Al-Jafra. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq describes it as this container, holding the knowledge of prophets and scholars from way back. Doesn't it kind of sound like a treasure chest of ancient wisdom, just waiting to be opened?
It definitely sparks the imagination, and it really gets at this idea in Islamic tradition that knowledge is so much more than just facts and figures. It's about a deeper understanding passed down through generations, connecting us to this incredible lineage of wisdom.
So it's like how that knowledge fits into a bigger picture, connecting to something beyond yourself.
Exactly. Al-Jafr represents this hidden, almost esoteric knowledge. It's about tapping into this wellspring of wisdom that's been carefully protected and passed down through time.
Wow, that is fascinating. And it makes me think about what Imam Musa al-Kazim says about the power of intellect. He says, and I'm quoting directly here, intelligence is a complete cover, a protection, for one, and extra knowledge and skills are evident beauty. Compensate your physical shortcomings with your extra knowledge and skills. Fight your desires with help from your intelligence, and in so doing, friendship is surrendered to and love becomes manifest for you. There's so much packed into that. But it seems to say that intelligence is about so much more than just being smart. It's about growing as a person and using your intellect to build real, genuine connections with others.
Absolutely. Imam Musa al-Kazim is drawing this powerful connection between intellect, knowledge, and personal growth. It's like he's saying intelligence can protect you from negative influences, and that the more you sharpen your intellect, the more you attract others. You radiate this wisdom and understanding.
Yeah. It's like that saying knowledge is power, but taken to a whole new level.
Yeah.
When you pair knowledge with intellect, you can have a more fulfilling life and feel more connected to the people around you.
Precisely. It really highlights how knowledge and intelligence, applied in the right way, can change your whole life. And this idea of applying knowledge reminds me of another hadith where Imam Jafar al-Sadiq talks about recognizing the armies of intelligence and ignorance. What are your thoughts on that imagery?
I think it's so powerful. It makes me think about this constant battle between knowledge and ignorance, not just in the world, but inside each of us. Like every day we're choosing what we pay attention to, what we believe, how we act. And those choices are influenced by either intelligence or ignorance.
That's a great point. It's not just a concept, it's something we experience every day. We're constantly encountering these armies and choosing which side to align with. And this struggle, it's something every single person faces, no matter their background or beliefs.
So how can we tell which army we're marching with? Are there signs we slipped into ignorance?
Imam Jafar al-Sadiq actually gives us some clues. He says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that looking for religious understanding from those who oppose your beliefs can lead you astray. This suggests that a sign of ignorance is clinging to your own limited perspective and shutting out different viewpoints.
That's interesting. It's like, even if you have good intentions, if you're only around people who agree with you, you could be missing out. There might be important information or perspectives out there that could challenge you and help you grow.
You have to be open to learning from different sources and be willing to question your own biases. And this leads us to another important point about intelligence that's emphasized in Al-Kafi. True intelligence isn't just about book smarts, it's also about morality and ethics.
That's right. Imam Ali al-Rida says, the most perfect of intelligence are those who are the best in moral discipline. It's like intelligence without a moral compass is incomplete, maybe even dangerous.
Exactly. It's a powerful message. Knowledge and intellect should be used for good. And that message is so important today. We live in a world where information is everywhere, but it's harder than ever to know what's true and to use knowledge in ethical ways.
I totally agree. It's like we have so much information, but it's not enough to just know stuff. We need wisdom, compassion, a strong sense of right and wrong to navigate this complex world. And speaking of navigating complexity, there's another hadith from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq that really got me thinking. He quotes Prophet Muhammad saying, "Those who work without knowledge destroy more than what they gain." That's a pretty serious warning.
It is. It really emphasizes that you have to seek understanding before you act. Even if your intentions are good, blind action can have unintended consequences.
So it's not enough to just do things. It's about understanding why we do them and making sure our actions are based on knowledge and wisdom.
Exactly. It's about finding the right balance between thinking and acting. And Al-Kafi has so many examples of how this plays out in different areas of life. For example, there's a hadith where Imam Jafar al-Sadiq warns Bashir al-Dahan not to look for religious understanding from people who oppose his beliefs because it could lead him astray.
So it's about being aware of where we get our information and being careful about who we trust, especially when it comes to faith and spirituality.
You have to recognize that not all sources of information are the same. Sometimes seeking knowledge from the wrong places can be more harmful than helpful.
It really makes you wonder, how do we know if a source is trustworthy? What can we look at to judge if information is reliable?
That's a great question. It's something that scholars and thinkers have been wrestling with for centuries. I think one important thing is to consider the source's motivations. Are they trying to inform you, or are they trying to manipulate you? Are they presenting a balanced view, or are they pushing a specific agenda?
So it's about looking deeper and considering the context and potential biases of the information. That's where critical thinking becomes so important.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is essential for navigating all the information out there, especially in our digital age, where we're constantly bombarded with messages from every direction.
And Al-Kafi seems to stress that critical thinking isn't just about questioning what other people tell us. It's also about questioning our own assumptions and beliefs. There's this hadith where a man asks Imam Jafar al-Sadiq about the existence of God. And instead of giving a theoretical answer, the Imam points to the natural world, the sun, the moon, the cycle of day and night.
It's such a brilliant example of how observing the world around us can spark critical thinking. We see this incredible order and complexity, and it makes us think about a force greater than ourselves.
It's like he's saying, look around, the proof is right there in front of you. It's not about blind faith, it's about using your intellect to connect the dots and arrive at a deeper understanding.
That's what's so powerful about these hadiths. They encourage us to use both our intellect and our faith, to question, to seek, to reflect, and to act with wisdom.
They remind us that true knowledge is a journey, not a destination. There's always more to learn, more to understand, more to apply to our lives.
Speaking of applying knowledge, one thing that stood out to me in this section of Al-Kafi is the practical advice it gives on seeking and applying knowledge. For instance, there's a hadith where Imam Jafar al-Sadiq tells those who believe their teachings to consider what they know sufficient. He says if they hear something different from what they already know, to know that it's for their own defense.
That's interesting. It suggests that knowledge is meant to be used in a practical way, to protect and guide us. It's not just about accumulating information for the sake of it.
Exactly. It acknowledges that sometimes the imams might present different perspectives or teachings depending on the situation or the people they're speaking to.
So it's about understanding that even within a trusted source of knowledge, there can be nuances and different levels of understanding.
You got it. It's about being aware of the context and applying knowledge wisely, not just blindly following every bit of information you come across.
It reminds me of another hadith where Imam Jafar al-Sadiq is asked about conflicting opinions on a religious matter. He advises the person to wait until they find someone who can explain it clearly, and until then, there's no pressure to choose a side.
That's such valuable advice, especially today when we're constantly bombarded with conflicting information. It's okay to take your time to research, to look for clarity. You don't have to rush into a decision without fully understanding.
It's about being patient in our search for knowledge and recognizing that true understanding takes time and effort.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that seeking knowledge is a lifelong journey, a constant process of learning and growing.
That's a great thought to keep in mind. As we continue exploring Al-Kafi, it's important to remember that these hadiths are meant to be thought about, discussed, and applied to our own lives. They're not just static pieces of information. They're living wisdom that can guide us toward a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
And that journey of exploration is what makes studying these texts so enriching. It's a constant process of discovery, and every time we revisit these hadiths, we gain new insights and perspectives.
So stay with us, because in the next part of our deep dive, we'll be going even deeper into the Book of Intelligence and Ignorance from Al-Kafi, uncovering more wisdom from these incredible Islamic thinkers.
I can't wait. It's always a privilege to engage with these timeless teachings and to see how they still resonate with us today. As we go deeper into the Book of Intelligence and Ignorance, one thing that really stands out to me is how these hadiths go beyond simply defining intelligence. They actually grapple with the very nature of knowledge, especially when it comes to understanding something as profound as God.
That's a really good point. I mean, how do you even begin to define or describe a being that's beyond our human comprehension?
Exactly. And Al-Kafi tackles this head on. It gives us these glimpses into the nature of God while also acknowledging the limits of what we humans can grasp. There's this hadith from Imam al-Rida where he describes God as glorious is he, similar to whom there is nothing. He is not a body, nor has he any form.
Wow, it's mind-blowing, isn't it? Trying to imagine a being that exists beyond any physical form, beyond any limitation we can even perceive. It's like trying to fit the ocean into a teacup.
What a perfect analogy. And that's where faith comes in, this acceptance that there are truths beyond our ability to fully understand. But at the same time, we're also invited to connect with God through his attributes. As we see in the words of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, he says that Allah cannot be known by analogy or physical senses, and he is not similar to people. He is mentioned in the verses of Revelation. He is known from the signs.
So it's about looking for those signs, those reflections of God's attributes in the world around us and in the scriptures. It's about cultivating that awareness and looking for a connection through the ways God has provided.
Exactly. And, you know, one idea that keeps coming up in these hadiths is the concept of imamat. I think it's worth taking a moment to explain this to our listeners.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Imamat refers to the spiritual and political leadership within the Shia tradition. It emphasizes this idea that there's a continuation of divinely guided leadership even after the Prophet Muhammad.
And we see this woven throughout Al-Kafi. There are hadiths that highlight the unique knowledge and authority of the Imams. For instance, there's a hadith from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq where he states, "The knowledge that came with Adam was not taken away. Knowledge is inherited. Ali was the knowledgeable person of this nation, Muslims. No one from us has ever left this world without leaving behind one like him in knowledge or what Allah wanted."
This passing down of knowledge from one imam to the next is a core part of how Shia Muslims understand imamat. It makes sure that the true teachings of Islam are protected and guided by divinely appointed leaders.
It's like this unbroken chain of wisdom, stretching all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad himself. And this idea of safeguarding knowledge, it reminds me of another fascinating part of Al-Kafi, the armaments.
Ah, yes. The armaments. These are physical objects passed down through the imams. They're said to include things that belong to the Prophet Muhammad himself, as well as texts and writings with secret knowledge.
It's almost like a tangible representation of that spiritual and intellectual lineage, right?
It's a perfect way to put it. It's a physical embodiment of the imam's link to the Prophet and their role as protectors of his legacy. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq actually makes a powerful connection between the armaments and the Ark of the Covenant in this hadith, he says. The armaments with us is like the case of the Ark with the Israelites. Wherever the Ark would go, kingdom would also follow. Wherever the armaments go among us, knowledge, leadership with divine authority, also follows it.
So it's like wherever these objects go, true knowledge and rightful leadership follow. It really highlights how spiritual authority, knowledge, and leadership are all interconnected in the Shia tradition.
Exactly, and there's this other hadith about the night of determination, also called Laylat al-Qadr. It's a night that's incredibly sacred in Islam, believed to be the night when the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad.
And what's so fascinating is how Al-Kafi connects this night to the Imams as well, suggesting that they too receive guidance and knowledge on this special occasion. For example, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq says, "Allah, majestic is who's mentioned, created the night of determination when he first created the world and created in it the first prophet that would come and the first executor of the will of prophet that would come."
It's such a powerful image, isn't it? Like this night is a channel for divine knowledge, connecting prophets and imams across time, ensuring that guidance continues to flow.
It adds a whole new layer of meaning to Laylat al-Qadr. And, you know, I was really struck by how Al-Kafi gives us these glimpses into the lives and personalities of the Imams. They're not just distant figures, but individuals who faced real challenges and navigated complex situations.
Yes, it humanizes them. It reminds us that they weren't just spiritual leaders, they were people who lived and breathed in this world, just like us. There's this hadith where Imam Jafar al-Sadiq is asked about the meaning of a verse in the Quran. He explains it and then says, "I learned all of it from the book of Allah, the Most Holy, the Most High. Allah, the Most Holy, the Most High, has said, in it there is the clarification of all things."
It reminds us that the Quran is the ultimate source of guidance. that even these divinely appointed figures drew their knowledge from its teachings.
Absolutely. And then there are other hadiths where the Imams show a level of knowledge that seems almost superhuman. For example, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq says, I certainly know what is in the heavens and what is in the earth. I know what is in paradise and what is in the fire. I know what was there and what will be there.
It's like they have access to this realm of knowledge that's beyond our normal perception. And yet there's also this beautiful sense of humility and awe in these hadiths, this feeling that even with all this incredible knowledge, they ultimately submit to the will and wisdom of God.
It reminds us that true knowledge, in its purest form, is a reflection of the divine. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating parts of the Shia tradition, the concept of the hidden Imam, also known as Imam Mahdi.
Right. The hidden Imam is believed to be the 12th and final Imam in Shia Islam. He's currently hidden from the world until a time chosen by God.
Exactly. This idea adds this sense of anticipation and hope for the future within the Shia worldview. And Al-Kafi hints at this concept without directly stating it.
There are these veiled references, like the hadith where Imam Jafar al-Sadiq talks about a man who mysteriously appears before Imam Ali and then disappears.
And Imam Ali describes him as, he who sees with the light of Allah, the most holy, the most high, hears with his understanding and speaks with his wisdom.
It's a clue. It leaves you wondering about this mysterious figure and what he represents.
And it reflects how complex and deep Islamic thought can be. But beyond those mysteries and complex concepts, Al-Kafi also gives us practical advice on how to look for and use knowledge in our everyday lives.
It encourages us to be active in our learning.
For example, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq says, those who know that we say nothing but the truth, what they know from us should consider it sufficient. If they would hear from us what is different from what they already know from us, they should note that it is our way of defending them.
So it's about using the knowledge we already have to figure out the truth, and being open to new ideas that might challenge what we think we know.
Exactly. It's all about that critical thinking we were talking about earlier. And there's another hadith that I think is so helpful, especially now when we're overwhelmed with information. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq is asked about conflicting opinions on a religious matter, and he says, he must wait until he finds one who would inform him, and until then he is not under any pressure.
That's so reassuring. It's okay to take a break, to look for a clear explanation, and not feel like you have to have all the answers right away.
It's about being patient in our search for knowledge and understanding.
So what does all this mean for us today as we read Al-Kafi?
It's a reminder that seeking knowledge is a lifelong journey, a journey of both intellectual and spiritual growth.
And that true intelligence isn't just about what you know in your head. It's about how you use that knowledge to make yourself and the world a better place.
You said it perfectly. And it's about choosing reliable sources, thinking critically, and approaching knowledge with humility. These are all essential parts of the journey.
It's like these hadiths are giving us a map, not just to intellectual understanding, but to a life lived with purpose and wisdom.
A roadmap. That's a great way to put it. We've talked so much about knowledge and intelligence, but this part of Al-Kafi also brings up ignorance, in all its different forms. It's not just about not knowing things, it's also about the danger of using knowledge the wrong way or acting without really understanding.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it reminds me of this hadith from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, where he cautions against looking for religious guidance from those who oppose your own beliefs.
Yeah.
He says it could lead you astray, which really underscores how important it is to seek knowledge from trustworthy and reliable sources, especially when it comes to matters of faith.
Absolutely. It's like he's saying, be careful who you trust, especially with something as important as your faith. Not all sources of information are created equal, Blindly accepting information without questioning where it comes from or who's sharing it and why, well, that can lead to some seriously distorted understanding.
It's true. It makes you think about how much responsibility we have as individuals to really think critically about the information we encounter every day and to be mindful of the sources we rely on. I mean, think about it. With the internet and social media, it's easier than ever to be led down the wrong path, to be misinformed or even manipulated.
It really is, and that's exactly why the teachings in Al-Kafi are so incredibly relevant today. They give us this framework for navigating the overwhelming world of information, and they help us develop a discerning mind, a mind that can separate truth from falsehood. And it's not just about external sources either, it's also about recognizing that we all have our own blind spots, our own potential for ignorance.
That's interesting. How do we identify those blind spots within ourselves then? How can we become more aware of our own potential for ignorance?
Well, there's this one hadith that really speaks to that, where Imam Jafar al-Sadiq quotes Prophet Muhammad saying, "Those who work without knowledge, they destroy more than what they gain." This is a powerful reminder that acting without understanding can lead to consequences we never intended, consequences that can even be harmful. It's about understanding that knowledge should always guide our actions, and that jumping into something without proper thought and consideration can often do more harm than good.
That is humbling, isn't it? Even when we have the best of intentions, we can still cause harm if we're not careful. It really highlights the importance of never stopping learning and of constantly reflecting on ourselves and our actions.
It really does. And it brings us right back to that idea that the pursuit of knowledge is a lifelong journey and an ongoing process. It's not about reaching some endpoint where we know everything. It's about continuously striving to learn and grow, to challenge our own assumptions, and to refine our actions based on what we discover along the way.
It's about recognizing that there's always more to learn and approaching knowledge with humility. And speaking of learning and discovery, there's this story in Al-Kafi that really beautifully illustrates the power of seeking knowledge from the right sources. It's the one where a man approaches Imam Jafar al-Sadiq and expresses his doubts about the existence of God.
Oh, yes, that's a classic one. What's so interesting is that instead of getting into this big theological debate, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq takes a completely different approach. He simply points to the natural world, the sun, the moon, the incredible balance and complexity of nature. And then he asks the man to consider, where did all this order and beauty come from? What is the source of all this?
It's so clever, isn't it? He doesn't try to force a belief.
Yeah.
He encourages the man to think for himself, to use his own powers of observation and reasoning.
It's the perfect example of what makes these hadiths so powerful. They're not just about giving us information. They're about cultivating wisdom, encouraging us to engage our minds and to seek a deeper understanding of the world around us and our place in it.
It's about looking beyond the surface and pondering the deeper meaning and purpose behind everything. And they really emphasize that true knowledge isn't just about intelligence. It's also about character, about using what we know for the greater good, and about living a life that reflects our understanding.
Well said. And speaking of living a life that reflects our understanding, I'm reminded of this hadith from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq where he says, "Those who know that we say nothing but the truth, what they know from us should consider it sufficient. If they would hear from us what is different from what they already know from us, they should note that it is our way of defending them."
That's a powerful statement. It's like he's saying that true knowledge comes with a responsibility to use what we know to protect and guide others, to stand up for truth and justice, and to make a positive difference in the world.
It really does. It's a call to action, reminding us that true intelligence isn't passive. It's about using our knowledge and understanding to create a better world for ourselves and for everyone around us.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. As we wrap up this deep dive into the Book of Intelligence and Ignorance from Al-Kafi, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that knowledge is an ongoing journey. It's about continuously seeking, questioning, and applying what we learn to our lives. It's about developing our intellect, our character, and always striving to use what we know for good.
I couldn't agree more. It's been such a pleasure exploring these profound teachings with you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we hope you'll join us again next time as we continue to explore the wisdom of Al-Kafi.